Hello and welcome to the Selling's Creative Podcast, a podcast exploring creativity's role in sales from motivation, ideas, people, business, and success. I'm your host, Brad Eather, a digital communications sales consultant, helping businesses develop digital communication strategies, training, and mentoring salespeople in the skill set of social selling. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Joe McKay, a true Australian globetrotter, joining us from where he currently resides in France. With an extensive career in marketing, Joe has more recently made a name for himself deploying his craft to the art of LinkedIn ghostwriting and business coaching. And is quite honestly one of the funniest guys hanging around on LinkedIn, coining the term Normcore for his straight up and down to earth approach to content. If you're interested in understanding the ideas behind ideation and how to find ideas for your content more consistently, this episode's for you. So without further ado, bienvenue, Joe.
Merci. C'est très gentil ton intro là. Merci.
How you been?
I'm sure you understood every word of what I said
Absolutely, man. Grazie.
there. That is brilliant. I've been good. Yeah, as you said, living in France, which is a dream come true. My wife's dream come true. But having a blast, really enjoying the solopreneur journey, and really excited to chat today.
Awesome. So first off the bat, I want to ask, what is ghostwriting? How would you describe it?
Basically, my job as a ghostwriter is to extract the ideas and brilliance and creativity, I guess, of the client and distill it, link it, repackage it, get it telling a kind of a coherent story and putting it out into the world. And in my case, putting it out on LinkedIn.
Nice. And let's talk about normcore content. It's kind of like a prediction into what types of trends you think are going to happen in 2025, right? So what is normcore content, and what do you think those content trends will be next year?
So Normcore. So I had this funny moment where I was literally washing my Crocs. I got a pair of Crocs a while ago, and I was literally like scrubbing them over the sink. And because I'd seen a lot of, I'm 35 now, I'm kind of hitting middle age, and I'd seen a lot of the younger people out there, wearing their Crocs and things, and I thought they looked comfortable. Like, they look awful, but to be cringe is to be free, is something my sister's always said to me. And so got myself these Crocs and sent me down this rabbit hole of like, how did a shoe like this become popular? And I ended up finding a podcast, on kind of, Crocs specifically, and this idea of normcore or dadcore as sort of as fashion trends. So normcore being the trend of I guess not serving other trends in a way, like just kind of dressing normally, but that in itself becoming a fashion trend. So rejecting other fashion trends in itself is a trend, this normcore trend. And I kind of realized that that's how I was dressing, I guess, because I do kind of care about how I look, and but I also don't want necessarily to let on that I care about how I look. And I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn almost every day, and I kind of had seen this normcore trend evolving on LinkedIn as well. So probably in the last 2 years or so, there's been a lot of focus on, you might have seen like the into out formatting and like one sentence paragraphs, and using special kind of punctuation symbols for bullets, and just a lot of very, I guess, vain, I would say, kind of focus on the aesthetic of a post rather than necessarily the content of that post. And what I've started to see more recently, and what I think is kind of the bucking of that trend, is more kind of raw, unpolished, more focus on function than form, more focus on content than format. And I really like that. And I think that's so important for actually sharing useful ideas. So I see that continuing to evolve as more and more people are actually getting on the platform. They're kind of getting the confidence to start sharing their ideas. I think we're going to see a lot more normcore content, which is a little bit less refined, but I think that the insights are often there, and that's really what I'm looking for now in when I scroll the LinkedIn feed. What's the lesson I can actually learn, rather than what's the kind of most visually appealing post that helps me read through the post and get to the bottom. It doesn't really tell me anything specific or useful.
Yeah. Because I suppose there's a lot of talk online at the moment about like being genuine and being authentic. You think that this normcore sort of plays into that role, more people getting out and giving it a crack, but not necessarily with all the frills and whistles that go behind someone who's been doing it for a while with a polished content.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's spot on. It is this idea of authenticity, or for me, it's more just feeling confident enough, comfortable enough to start sharing your ideas, even if you feel as though they're not completely like fully formed or fully polished. What I've found is writing about something is how you figure out what you really think about something, and is one of the best ways to refine that kind of general thought into a more specific, concrete point or set of points.
Yeah.
So that creative exercise of writing, and sharing unpolished stuff is going to help you also get feedback from your audience. It's going to tell you what's actually adding value, what's helpful to the people around you, and what's maybe just more of a brain fart that's in your own head. But either way, you're learning and you're developing that skill.
Because I think like I've spoken about this with in one of my previous podcasts, but the idea of just putting yourself out there and having a purpose beyond content, having a time, using it as a reflection piece, using it as a moment to consolidate your ideas. I think more people are catching on to the fact that, there's actually almost an element of professional development and that doesn't necessarily go along with follow account. It's just the practice of creating content. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think writing and getting better at synthesizing your thoughts and getting them on paper is such a useful skill. If you're selling, if you're working in marketing, like kind of whatever you're doing, really, being able to just distill down what's in your head, is a really important skill for yourself. And I think there's probably flow on benefits for publishing that stuff in a forum like LinkedIn or somewhere else. But yeah, just the sheer act of putting pen to paper, or doing that digitally, is so important for development and just refining how you think about stuff.
So, one of the questions that I ask people in preparation for this podcast is what kind of creative activities did you get up to it as an adolescent? And you actually said something really interesting that I think is worth exploring. You mentioned the difference between the competitiveness of sport versus the essence of creativity. And you said selling can sometimes become a competitive type of thing. Deals are won and deals are lost, but creativity just isn't like that. It's the opposite. Can you walk me through what you were thinking when you said that?
Yeah, well, look, my adolescence was spent playing sport, basically, and sport has winners and sport has losers, and it's about kind of, being the best that you can be. There's a competitive nature to it, and so that's kind of how I approached a lot of my life early on. Whether that's, trying to go for an internship or a graduate role, or a job, whatever it might be, that kind of the competitive mindset of, for me to win, for me to have success, someone else is not going to win. And if I don't win, if I can't have this success, then that's not good for me. More recently, I've realized that creativity has to be the opposite of that. My wife's a painter, and the more she paints, the better. There's just more art in the world. There's more creativity. It's not about which painting is her best one, which one is the most valuable, which one do more people like. It's that act of expression. And so with that creative mindset, when you're thinking in the creative plane, and if you think about writing, for example, um, the more writing you do, the better. Like I just see it as a positive. It's not about trying to win or trying to compare yourself to other people. It's really just more is more, and more is I guess better. Not sure if I'm doing a good job of explaining this, but
Well,
it's been a big mindset shift for me.
yeah, like let's put it into perspective. I played guitar for a long, long time, and that's sort of my creative outlet. And it's the pursuit of forever just trying to get that little bit better. That pursuit of practice that just over time you get better and better and better at something. But I can't compare myself to Jimi Hendrix, you know? He's on a different playing field, and I'm not trying to be better than Jimi Hendrix. I'm just trying to become a better guitar player so that because I enjoy it, right? And I think that when it comes
Mm.
to writing and stuff like that as well, the more you practice, the better and better you get. So, like, I'm sure you get this often as well. People are nervous about writing on LinkedIn because they feel that they're poor copywriters. And I can tell you, and I'm sure you're the same. Like when I started, I was pretty average, and then over time, with practice, you get better and better and better. I'm going to read this because I thought what you said in the original interview was quite nice. You said, "My painting can't beat your painting. My sketch can't beat your sculpture. Your song can't beat my interpretive dance. And creativity is not about winning and losing." So I thought that'd be a nice way to wrap up that little piece. Um, so let's talk about content. What would you consider are the bare minimum things to create a valuable piece of content?
For me, the first thing to consider is who we're trying to create value for. So knowing your audience. I'm always trying to figure out with clients and for myself the one person audience that I'm trying to talk to. The more clear I can get on who we're trying to reach, who we're trying to add value to, um, the easier it's going to be to achieve that. So I think that's the starting point. You need to know who you're writing for, and then value from there can be, I guess, delivered in so many different ways. Like it could be a bit of inspiration, it could be some education, it could just be entertainment. It could just be being a small light moment in someone's life as they're on the train to work. Um, so it really depends, I guess, on how you want to look at it. But for me, it all comes down to having the audience in mind, and the better that you know them, then the better you're going to be able to give something to them, create something for them that's valuable.
Because I feel like there's sort of two parts to the value equation. One, like you said, you have to know your audience, but then on the other side, on the flip side, you also need to know what you're comfortable with in terms of you need to create something and put it out there. What are your strengths in that area? Whether that's writing, whether that's presenting yourself on video, and how you actually present that message is, where you choose whether or not you're going to be entertaining or tell a joke or how you're going to provide that value. Um, so I think it's important to always keep in mind those that it needs to be valuable for your audience, yes, but also valuable for yourself as well in terms of how you're going to present your message and how you feel most comfortable. Because I think tying back into the normcore authenticity piece, that's where that lies. Being comfortable in that scene.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, sometimes again the creativity element does come into it, because for me, I want to actually consciously do something that is, for me, I guess, that is a test, is an experiment, is just an expression of something that's inside me, without necessarily having an objective to it, or a deeper goal behind it, but just that the act of expression, in whatever form that comes to you.
So one of the things that you sort of stand by is the idea that, well, you say the best content isn't written, it's found. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So, and I think a big blocker for many people is this idea that I'm not a creative person. You know, where am I going to get ideas from? I don't know what to write about because I've never been creative, and that's a story I told myself for a long time. I worked in a marketing agency for 3 to 4 years. In agency speak, I was a suit. So you have creatives and you have suits, and so I was an account manager, a suit. So not someone that um, theoretically was responsible for the creative work. And I kind of let myself become the numbers guy, become um, the non-creative person. And that was a mindset that I had to change as I kind of left that role and moved into working for myself and doing other things. I realized that the creativity expressed itself in so many different ways, and the way that I approached content when I was being most successful, I realized, was not necessarily sitting, in front of a blank page or brainstorming or whatever other ideas you might have around what creativity looks like. It was really going back into the conversations, the interactions I was having with customers, with people in my network, with other interesting people that I knew, and just pulling out those moments, those interactions, those details. Finding content all around me, rather than trying to sit there and create it from scratch, like a painter starts with a blank canvas. And this idea of finding content rather than creating it really started to hit home the more I did it. Like, the more I felt stuck in front of the blank page, the more I realized, who have I been talking to this week? What have people been saying to me this week? Um, if I'm on a call with someone, when has someone been really kind of leaning in and paying attention? Maybe there's something in that, and started to then use that as my philosophy for all content. So I think of it as kind of content repurposing, but not just from like video to text to a graphic, more repurposing from a context, like a one-on-one conversation, to a more of a broadcast format.
Yeah. Are there any other sort of places that you look towards, like media outlets or anything, to sort of draw inspiration? Just like broadening out this idea of finding content?
Yeah, there's I think if you start looking, there's content kind of all around you to be found. So yeah, it can be conversations you're having with customers or prospects. It can be even within your colleagues within the business, meetings that you're in, conversations that you're having around the water cooler. Scrolling LinkedIn and seeing what's really driving engagement and interest from other creators, and people, following those comment threads where people are getting really interactive and engaged. Reddit is a great source of inspiration for what's kind of getting people talking at the moment. But I think it's not just about um, content either. Like, I think this can work in the other direction, so that the existing content that you're sharing can actually potentially also feed into your sales efforts. Can feed into your delivery of the actual product or the service that you're delivering. So I'm always trying to look for opportunities to. The way I think of it is kind of fill at least two buckets. So I believe most of us are either kind of doing sales or marketing or delivery at any given point in time. And if you can take an activity that's filling up one of those buckets and fill another bucket at the same time, you can really, and especially for me as a solopreneur, that's the only way I can kind of leverage my time to get everything done.
Yeah, because you're using content like myself as the marketing sales funnel.
Yeah, so content, I guess, at first glance is kind of is marketing through and through. But if you see a piece of marketing, a piece of content that really resonates, then it may be something that you know is a focal point when you're in a sales conversation, and vice versa. So you might move into a sales conversation and there might be an objection or a question that comes up. That might then inform the marketing, so the content that you create the following week to kind of preempt that objection or answer that question, right through to your delivery. So again, if you might create a piece of content that's asking for ideas from your network, and that might feed the next offer that you create, or the a part of the service that you deliver might be informed by what people are telling you they're looking for. So thinking about all those three kind of buckets together, and where you can use activity you're doing kind of that's for one bucket to fill at least one of the other buckets is
So,
a strategy I use.
so it's like wherever you are in the sales process or the delivery process, using it as a feedback loop, and all roads sort of lead back to the top of the funnel, which is the content piece.
Absolutely, yep. So you finish a project with a client or deliver a product, take their feedback, their review, whatever it is, as you say, tip that into the top of the funnel. Use that for your marketing.
Yeah.
Take negative or constructive feedback, and adapt the product itself or the service itself. So yeah, it becomes this kind of flywheel effect.
Yeah. And I notice you quite openly share negative feedback that you might have got for a particular prospect or something that you're doing. You share the negative feedback as well as the positives.
Yeah,
What are the lessons in that for you? Why do you do that?
I think particularly for, and this probably comes back a little bit to the Normcore idea. I think something, a platform like LinkedIn particularly, can feel like everything's perfect. Can feel like everyone's wearing their best outfits, and everyone's dressed to the nines to go to a wedding. But life isn't like that day in and day out, and so I'm trying to share more of the ups and downs. I'm trying to share more holistically, kind of everything that goes on within my business. Um, Again, to try and be as authentic as possible and show people what it's like working with me. I guess what my values are and what I stand for. And I think there's a business benefit or a purpose for me to do it, and that is trust building.
Mm.
I'm not going to try and pretend that every project, every client has stunning success. I believe that if they do the work and if it's a good fit, we will get great results together. But sharing what it's really like, I think, is for me is about trying to build trust with my audience, and demonstrate that um, I'm doing my best. I will give every client my best effort. But this is kind of exactly what you can expect through working with me.
So we've sort of gone through this idea of um, finding content. So I suppose the next stage is how do you're finding those pieces of content, but then you actually need to go through the ideation process and take those moments of inspiration and distill it down to the words that you're going to write. What's your ideation process in that scenario? How do you collect your ideas? How do you record them so that you're banking them up?
Yeah, so I take this idea of finding content very literally. So for me, that means I record every call I do, like every interaction I'm having with a customer or prospect. I've got my Fireflies Notetaker in there, and so I know I'm going to have access to the transcript. And so it's a combination for me. The ideation is a combination of like just me thinking through the call. What did they particularly say, or what's something that maybe I particularly said that stood out or got got them engaged. And then it's going into the transcript and literally like grabbing that segment of conversation or that thing that they said, the objection they raised or the question they asked me. And then maybe the teaching that I had or the response that I had, if it's a coaching call, maybe the insight that I shared, and literally trying to start with that as the starting point for a piece. You may then obviously kind of polish up some of the language or remove filler words and kind of, if there's repetition and things like that, tidy it up. But I'm a big believer in literally finding content all around me rather than trying to ideate or brainstorm particularly
in the moment.
From there.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think if you are kind of sitting in front of a blank page and wondering where to start, like that is going to be a challenging situation. So if you're not feeling inspired, it's like, where can you just go hunting for something that's kind of already 80% there that you may then tweak or adapt.
Yeah.
I think one area where ideation, plays a role for me is if there is, like, let's say it's a sales call and someone the prospect raises an objection or a reason not to purchase. There might be a moment where I wish I said something different, or after the fact, I kind of think of a different way to handle that objection, or a different lens for them to consider the decision through. So that might be a moment where I'm actually kind of ideating or creating from scratch, where I'm sort of writing out almost what I wish I had said, or a different answer than the one that I gave.
Because I suppose what I'm trying to get at is like the process of ideation. It's not coming up with an idea in front of a blank page. When you're talking about going and finding content, something that I do is like my notes on my phone. I just have, in that moment where I find inspiration, I open up my phone and shorthand, pretty much write the post shorthand, so that when I'm sitting in front of a screen and I've allocated time to make a post, I just refer back to my phone and I have a million and one ideas that I've thought up over the course of a week. I suppose.
I totally agree. I think so if we're trying to find content, it's even better if the content finds us, an idea finds us, and making that note, like capturing it somewhere. Like I've got a bunch of post-it notes. I've got my notes app on my phone if I'm out and about. I think absolutely getting just even enough to kind of prompt to jog your memory of what the idea was. Capturing that when the moment strikes is crucial. So you've got a bit of a library that you can go back into. As you said, when you've kind of allocated time for marketing, for content, you're not staring at the blank page.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get into next, because allocating time is incredibly important. But we have thing. The purpose is to put it on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's not necessarily the best place to come up with an idea because it's full of distractions. So I want to talk about what do you do in those moments of focus to actually make the most of that half hour that you've got allocated to write that post? What's that look like?
Yeah. So I have this approach that I think of as the tunnel. So if I need to do kind of deep creative work, even for a short period of time, I try and put myself in the tunnel. And so for me, in the tunnel, there's no phone reception, there's no internet. I've got one tab open or my notebook in front of me, and I've just got one thing that I'm trying to do. And there's no distractions from that. And I kind of, if I find myself, being distracted or thinking about something else, or considering, moving on to the next thing, I just remind myself, I'm in the tunnel, and it's like kind of sitting on a train, and like I can't get off the train until it arrives at the destination, at the end of the block of time that I've allocated. So I just need to sit here and do this one thing now. And a big thing for me has been recruiting my other senses to help me kind of stay focused in the tunnel. So I use music, I use movie soundtracks typically, because I realized that music with lyrics in it,
Mm.
my brain just latches onto the words and will be distracted by that. But I've now got kind of my 3 movie soundtracks, like a short, a medium, and a long, and I've kind of convinced my brain, like, when I press play on this soundtrack, I'm in the tunnel, and it becomes this kind of hack for my senses where I've moved into the tunnel. This music's playing, this familiar music's playing, and I know that I just keep working on this one thing I said I wanted to work on until the end of that soundtrack, and that's when I've arrived, and I can get out of the tunnel and kind of reset and figure out what comes next. Usually stretch, have a break, make sure that context switches as well.
Mm.
So it's a very clearly like defined, like delineated, focused time, and then when it's over, and I move on to something else.
Yeah, right. What's I'm gonna see if I can do this. I don't know how it's gonna translate on the camera. And I've got my that's my tunnel. I've got my little light that flashes
Yep.
different colors and put my music on, and
Okay.
everything's
Yeah.
it's very much like a scene change.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people who like will physically change location. There might be a spot that they go for like kind of deep work. It can be like lighting a certain candle with a certain scent, like recruiting your senses to help you focus. I think has been a game changer for me.
What are the soundtracks?
So the short one is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's about 40 minutes, I think. The kind of the medium, which is where I use the most, is, and it's quite topical at the moment, Gladiator. So I'm devastated. I haven't seen Gladiator 2 yet, but so Gladiator soundtrack is probably about an hour and 10 minutes. And then Interstellar is the long one. So I think that's close to 2 hours. So I think Hans Zimmer
Yeah,
did,
I was
well, he
gonna
didn't
say a
do
bit
The
of a
Good, the Bad,
Hans
and the
Zimmer
Ugly,
fan.
but yeah, I just find it has to be instrumental. Like any lyrics just distract my brain straight away. So those become just my small, medium, and long kind of focus times.
Yeah, nice. So I want to take it back to the ghostwriting, because I've got experience posting for myself, but you sort of take it to the extremes and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Um, so I was wondering, how do you approach that? How do you write confidently about somebody else?
Well, this is where my uh, finding content mindset really originated. Like what I realized as a ghostwriter, if I'm not asking good questions, then I'm not going to have a lot of material to work with. So it's not ghost thinking. Ideally, it is just ghost writing. It's taking the ideas and the things that they've shared with me and then editing, essentially. So as a ghostwriter, again, like I'm literally trying to find the content in what they've shared, the stories they've shared, the insights they've shared. And so for me, it's all about preparation. It's all about asking good questions, open questions, questions that get them talking, get them comfortable, and then kind of following up, pulling on the thread as much as I can to get to something a little bit deeper than surface level and something a bit more interesting.
Because something that salespeople are very familiar with is questioning. Um, Trying to find
Mm.
those questions that invoke an insight where you can start going down and digging a little bit deeper. And in the prep interview, you mentioned that you started avoiding why type questions in in your ghostwriting meetings.
Mm.
Why do you make that decision?
So I have gotten to know pretty well recently a customer researcher called Hannah Shamji, and she's done over 1,000 customer interviews. And this was something that she taught me. If you ask someone why they did something, if you ask them why they didn't do something, why they believe something, um, they'll always have an answer and they'll give you like a really clear answer, but it will always be reflective of their ego. It'll be the way they answer will reflect the way that they want you to see them, the way they want to kind of see themselves, the way that they believe they are, and it won't necessarily be the truth. So what Hannah kind of advised and what I've found really effective is focusing on like concrete acts, facts, like actions that they've taken, facts and things that have happened. So that leads to more how and what questions rather than why. So I think if you ask why, like you will always get an answer. They will always know in their own mind, or they'll have something to say. But if you can ask, how did you do that? Or what did you do next? Or what was it that made you decide to reach out? Whatever the context is, that's when you'll get into uh, the truth, because these are things that have happened. And that's also where I find in a ghostwriting context, that's what can make the story or the post much more actionable and concrete and feel much more real, rather than someone kind of just having like a theoretical statement about
Mm.
why it can be this thing happened and it taught me this. So I think it's a productive way to get the truth, but it's also a productive way to really get to a story.
Yeah.
Whereas why will tend to lead you into a more theoretical space.
Yeah, because as you said that, I'm thinking if I asked you why you were in France, you would tell me pretty quickly why you were in France. But if I asked you how did you end up in France, all of a sudden you're going to be eliciting
There's a
there's a
story there.
story there.
Yeah,
It's good
yeah.
advice.
So that's been really helpful for me as a ghostwriter. Actually, for me as a salesperson, as a solopreneur, I have a job to do as a salesperson. And so in discovery calls, and even in kind of post project, like end of project calls, when I'm trying to gather testimonials, gather insights from customers, to make my offer better and to make my marketing better. Um, I'm always trying to focus on what and how based questions rather than why.
Mm. I find it. I think that's a really good takeaway for anyone out there that's struggling with questioning. Um, the other thing that I think a lot when it comes to this, when it comes to people being hesitant to start posting or getting out there, getting over the hump of just they're in the process of making excuses at this point. But a lot of the excuses will be around, well, I've already got a job role. I'd like to start posting content, but I've also got a job role. I don't know how to fit it in. And the reason I don't know how to fit it in is because I don't know how to make that balance. And I think we've probably already gone over it with that whole feedback loop. But I think that you're in an interesting position because a lot of people will be doing a job role, but then content's like this new thing. You're creating content for other people, and then you're creating content for yourself as well. So I was wondering, how do you balance that your content as opposed to your client's content?
Yeah, this is something that I've struggled with. I've sort of what I found was at a certain point in time, I felt like a chef who was feeding himself baked beans. Like I would spend the whole week and all my kind of creative energy writing for clients and delivering, X amount of posts every week. And then I would kind of get towards the end of the week, get all the client work done. And then it would be like, okay, what's my marketing look like for next week? What am I cooking myself for dinner? And again, that's where this kind of finding content rather than creating content was born out of necessity. Like I started to realize that I was having all these conversations and all these interactions, and so what could I just grab and reheat in a way? Um, what could I turn into something new, or take it from one context and put it into a different context? So it's a challenge. I mean, I've learned now to kind of shuffle the batting order, and I actually need to um, find and write my own content first. I think that's I treat myself as a client and an important client, and so I always make sure that I'm on top of my stuff. and then it is just a good combination of like the tunnel, having some focus time, context switching when I'm not trying to be in deep focus. But I honestly can't stress enough how much I'm just focused at the moment on trying to find stuff that's already there, and kind of get it ready as quickly as I can.
Because I think that something that's something that I think takes a lot of people by surprise when they start doing this and start to do it more consistently and continue doing it consistently is I don't think it's appreciated how much cognitive load it takes to continually deliver and come up with ideas over and over and over again, and that's where people fall short. So I think if there's one thing that we could take away from this conversation today and this idea of finding it's
Content's
found,
found, not
yeah,
created.
content's found, not created, is that that being prepared to take down those notes and do those shorthand scribbles, um, finding that inspiration throughout the day, whether that's your client conversations or seeing a post online, that takes the cognitive load out of it. That means you're prepared, and that means that you can continue delivering on the consistency piece and deliver value, because you're not coming up with the idea on the spot now. You've actually already done the first draft, and now you're on the second draft,
Yeah.
and you're improving on it as you go. So I hope that if there's one thing that people can take away from this, is that it's probably the hardest part is just ideating content. And I think that the way that you put it, content's found, not written, got it, is quite powerful, especially if you're just starting out. So,
Well, and I think most of us will have a note taker that joins our calls, and so you can even use a prompt to that note taker to say, pull out all the situations where the customer um, was using emotive language, or was expressing a challenge or a struggle or a goal or an ideal, positive and negative ends of the spectrum. And you can just ask your AI tool, your note taker, to provide the exact language that they used. And that, like, those little grabs can become, whether it's the hook of a post, the opening of a post, or just the idea that you want to respond to, or start writing about. Leverage technology, leverage the tools around you to pull the bits out, the most engaging bits out, and start from there.
absolutely. I haven't talked about AI in this podcast yet because it is a rabbit hole that I don't think we've got time for in every single podcast, but everybody's talking about it. But I use it for exactly the same ways too. Putting in a lump of text, especially customer conversations, and pulling out main things. I mean, if you're talking about fireflies, that's an AI note taker, and it tells you the positive and negative sentiments of the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really great place to start. And you can export it, which means you can chuck it into another tool.
You mentioned before just around kind of consistency and things like that. I think that is something that's adding to the cognitive load as well. Like, I think people are potentially looking at starting creating content as some kind of lifelong commitment, that I must start. If I start doing this, then I'm going to have to be consistent. I have to keep it up. Why not just do one post? I actually think like consistency is an ideal, is a goal for sure, but just try one and see what happens. Then try one the next time you kind of get inspired or you have an idea. Like, don't stop yourself from starting because you're worried that you can't be consistent. Like, start and just do it inconsistently. That's probably better than not doing anything.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I had a chat with a guy called Chris Clark in one of our previous episodes about the idea of consistency, and he's built a business off his content, and he's got a very normcore approach as well. But we talked about the idea of how consistency has developed for him over time. And essentially, he said that in the early days, his consistency, he was committed to one post a week. 2 years down the track, it's developed from 1 to 2 posts a week, and now he's doing it six times a week because through repetition, things get easier. You get better at it. And going back to the creativity piece at the beginning, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. And I know for myself, like people say, how do you have all the time to make a video? Well, I've practiced to the point that I can get a video down to editing, like film it, editing in 20 minutes.
Yep.
To finish the conversation out, the final question that I like to ask people is, what's your definition of creativity?
My definition of creativity, I think it's just the ability to produce something that didn't exist before, like whether that's a short LinkedIn post, whether it's a sketch, a painting, an interpretive dance, like changing a recipe that you cook regularly. I think it's just the simple act of producing something that's never existed before. And I try and avoid like assigning a qualitative lens to creativity. It's not about how good is it or how bad is it or could it be better. It's really just it is. You created it, you wrote it, or you filmed it. Whatever it might be. So yeah, building something or expressing something that hasn't existed before. That's as simple as it is for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. As you said that, it just reminded me, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, but it had Zach Braff in it and Natalie Portman. It was a bit of an obscure movie, and Natalie Portman says she just wants to do something unique every day. And he's like, what do you mean? She's just like, done for the day.
That's it. Yep. And if the camera's rolling, even better.
Yeah. So, Joe, thanks for joining us. What do you have going on at the moment? Is there anything that you want people to know about?
Look, I'd love to connect with listeners on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me. So Joe McKay, JoeMcKay. We'll share a link to my profile, and I do a weekly email out to my subscribers. I cover all sorts of writing tips, ideas for content inspiration, where to go hunting for content, and how to use LinkedIn more effectively. So if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see my newsletter floating around there. I'd love to have you in my ecosystem.
Awesome, mate. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you. Thanks for letting us in behind the closed doors of a ghostwriter into some of your processes. It's been great.
Great to chat to you, Brad. Thank you.
Cheers.